remember the way the halogen lights hummed above our heads, illuminating the factory floor in a sickly yellow glow. The air was thick with oil and sweat and cheap cologne that clung to our skin. It was dawn, 5:30, and the factory bell had just split the silence, sharp and unwelcome, telling us we were free to leave, if you could call it freedom. My arms trembled from hours of hoisting steel molds onto conveyor belts. My mind, though, danced nowhere near production quotas or my aching muscles. I saw flashes of light, snippets of stories waiting to be assembled. A child at a street vendor's cart, an old woman humming a hymn, the swirl of scarves at the Zocalo during festival nights. I'd walk the avenue afterward and see stories all around me, real ones, colorful and messy. I couldn't shut it off, this urge to capture what everyone else ignored, and it got me in trouble, more often than not. On the bus home, I'd jot notes onto scraps, ideas for a documentary that would show life here, raw and unscripted. Not the postcard Mexico that filled tourist brochures, but the messy one I loved. But to them, my dream was embarrassing, not because it was grand, but because it was so alien. Filmador, my tia Irma would scoff, rolling her eyes as if I'd said astronaut or bullfighter. My own mother, exhausted and brown-eyed and compressed with worry, would ask plainly, "Y eso te va a dar para..." But no one outside my circle cared, and even my friends humored me more than anything. I remember the laughter when I screened my first little film in the courtyard, grainy images, wobbly sound, my voice cracking with nerves as I introduced it. When the lights went up, there was polite applause. Then the taunting started. Nothing cruel, but bruising in its way. "You think some gringo is gonna want to watch this, Javi? Ay, me Spielberg, maybe you can work in Televisa, eh?" That night, my cousin Hugo mimed holding a mic, sticking it in my face every time I spoke. I laughed it off, but shame pulled inside me, deep and cold. I didn't touch the camera for weeks. The cycle repeated. Inspiration, brief hope, then another dismissal. A teacher told me that if I really wanted to make a film, I'd need to get serious equipment, serious stories, serious money. The kind of seriousness that meant box-ticking narratives about cartels or pretty beaches, or else nothing at all. So I slipped back into routine. Shifts on the assembly line, evenings on the roof listening to radio soap operas, pretending I didn't care when I absolutely, achingly did. One morning, a week before Christmas, the foreman caught me scribbling on a lunch napkin instead of packing up for the day. He gave me a look, tired, resigned, and signaled me over. He didn't raise his voice. "Mira, Javier, daydreaming is fine, but I need people who want to be here. ¿Me entiendes?" I nodded. I didn't argue. So that sunrise, while the city was still graffitied with darkness, I walked out past the rolling shutter doors with my severance envelope pressed flat in my pocket. My hands trembled, not from cold, but from the mixture of terror and, God help me, relief. I was free to fail as spectacularly as I wanted. There was nothing left for me here. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I wandered through Tlatelolco as the church bells rang. Pigeons scattered around my shoes and street sweepers eyed me sideways. Somewhere, a trumpet started playing, distant, wistful. I felt as if the city was saying, "So now what?" At home, silence bristled in the air. My mother, sitting at the kitchen table with her cardigan hiked up around her shoulders, looked up when I came in. There were soft lines around her mouth, the kind that form only after years of grown children disappointing you. "They let me go," I said. I sold my old bicycle and scraped together enough for a used digital camera that shut off after 45 minutes. It wasn't much, but the lens was clean. I told myself it would be my last try. I started to record things no one else seemed to care about. Elderly men asleep on benches at Alameda Central. The clatter of tortilla presses at midnight. The way the city seemed to breathe in the quiet hour before day broke. I interviewed women sweeping the street by moonlight. I filmed a group of children who built miniature kites from plastic bags and twine. I worked odd jobs to get by: waiter, night clerk, runner for a local bakery. I edited on borrowed computers, snatching Wi-Fi from cafes until someone would shoo me away. I submitted clips to contests, online forums, anywhere someone might notice. I learned to withstand the jabs and eye rolls. At big family dinners, I'd hear the old jokes repeated. Little winks and elbows. Cuidado. I let it wash over me, trained myself not to flinch. I pretended it didn't sting. Months blurred into years. There were moments I would wake in the dark, my heart hammering, and wonder what it would feel like to let go of the dream. Whether it would be easier, lighter. One time, after getting rejected from a small festival in Puebla, my 6th in a month, I walked the city from dusk to dawn, camera in hand, trailing dust, sleep, and doubt. I filmed the city at its loneliest and told myself that was all I needed. Then, 3 years in, something shifted. By chance more than design, I finished a short documentary about a local luchador, a man in his 60s who taught wrestling to street kids at an abandoned gym. I called it El Maestro Invisible. I uploaded it as usual, never expecting much. But someone noticed, a filmmaker from the States who happened to be in the city. He messaged me, simple, direct. Can we talk? I met him in a cafe in Coyoacan. He was older, white-haired, bearded, wearing a battered denim jacket covered in festival pins. He said, "This is honest work, Javier. Haunting, real. There's an international doc festival in Oaxaca. I know some folks. Want to send it?" I sat with that offer, tasting it, afraid it would vanish if I moved too quickly. When I said yes, I halfway believed it was all a dream. It wasn't. The film got in just a tiny slot, a midnight showing, but still, they paid for my bus ride south. I stood in the back as the film played, the laughter rising at the good parts, the silence imperceptible but deep in the sadder stretches. When it ended, a woman came up to me and said, "Thank you. You showed my city how it really lives." It was a small thing, but it was also everything. That film led to another. I shot a mini-series about musicians who busk in a historic center, and later, the piece on a women's collective who turned disused trains into traveling libraries. Each time, the circle widened. I got gigs assisting on bigger shoots, sometimes just hauling cables, but I soaked up every minute. I made contacts, took notes, stayed late to edit. The grants were small, but they paid in recognition, in the slow burning fuel of other people's belief. I learned to say no when someone tried to mold me into something I wasn't. I kept returning to the old city blocks that bred me, looking for stories people had overlooked. Each time I considered leaving for something safer, the images yanked me back. The first big festival, international, with real cameras and projectors, was in Morelia. I wore borrowed clothes, a shirt I'd pressed under a stack of books. My film, this one about a single mother and her struggle to open a restaurant, played to a crowded theater. I tried to hide my shaking hands as the credits rolled. The applause was soft, drawn out, not thunderous, but not polite either. When an old man in the back wiped his eyes, I thought, this is why I stayed. But despite the travel, recognition, even modest checks, I was always aware of what I'd left behind. I missed my mother's sweet café de olla, my neighbors, even their gossip. I found myself phoning home more often, listening to the stories I hadn't made time for before. The invitation came unexpectedly. It was a message from the cultural center, back in my old neighborhood. Queremos hacer una función especial de tus documentales. ¿Puedes venir? I stared at the screen, disbelief crashing through me, then laughter. They wanted me back, not to sweep the floors or help with the sound system, but to show my work. I called my mother. She sounded proud. shy, maybe even relieved. "Come early," she said.